honestly, I couldn't have had a better life than what payroll's given me. And that's not just for me, but what I see sort of gives back to people. I go back to my point at the first place where it touches everybody. I don't think industry still truly respects what payroll's got, because if you're an accountant, you're doing the numbers, you're balancing the books. If you're HR, it's about legislation. But payroll truly understands the data and the numbers and can actually do something with that. But I still don't think industry's bought into realising how powerful payroll can be.
Keeping businesses thriving, compliance and safe, forecasting strategy, it's all on our mind. It's time payroll took its place in the boardroom to shine.
What does global payroll without borders actually look like in real life? It's one platform handling every country you operate in. Real-time insights, automated tax logic, and zero handoffs between HR, IT, finance, or local vendors. That's exactly what happens when payroll runs on Deal's own global infrastructure. It's faster, it's cleaner, and built for teams that need accuracy every single time. See it for yourself at deel.com/nickday. Most payroll careers last a decade, or maybe two. In fact, maybe even 3 or even 4 at a push. Well, my guest today has been shaping payroll for over 51 years. He's seen payroll in the 1970s, the rise of Oracle, the birth of modern HR, and multiple economic eras in between. In fact, he's changed jobs at 62 in the middle of a global pandemic, and he's been headhunted for every role since 1993. He even once had a job interview he didn't even know was an interview over dinner at the House of Lords. If you care about payroll, if you care about leadership, legacy, or learning from someone who's lived one of the most extraordinary careers this profession has ever seen, then you're going to need to hear this conversation. Now, if you're joining us for the first time, welcome. This is, of course, the Payroll Podcast. I'm your host. My name is Nick Day. I'm the CEO at JGA Recruitment Group. We're a specialist global payroll recruiter. If you're joining us for the first time today, welcome. Please do remember to click subscribe or follow. But most importantly, if you can give us a review, that would be great. It really helps the algorithms. But most importantly, share this episode with your payroll colleagues and friends. That really helps us to reach a wider audience and really raise the profile of this wonderful profession. Now, as I mentioned in my introduction today, I have the privilege of speaking with someone who has not only witnessed payroll history, he has lived it, shaped it, and left an extraordinary legacy across both public and private sector payrolls. My guest today is of course, the award-winning Stephen Abbotts, Director at Azets, and the recent winner of the CIP Lifetime Achievement Award. And that's for his incredible contribution to the organization that he works for now, but most importantly, to the industry. And we're going to find out all about that today. He spent 33 years in public sector payroll, 18 years in private sector payroll, and he's built a career filled with stories that most of us in payroll could only ever dream of. So without further ado, it's truly an honor. Stephen, welcome to the Payroll Podcast. How are you feeling?
Great. Thanks, Nick. And welcome to you. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, super stoked to have you with me here, Stephen. Well, I'm going to start with my first question. An important one, I think, after 51 years. What does the word payroll mean to you?
Obviously, Nick, after so long, it means such a lot, actually, that there's not much in this world that affects every working person in the way that payroll does. And it's actually quite proud to work in such an environment where you're contributing so much, not just to the economy, but to people as well, in terms of their lives and the outcomes from delivering payroll each week and each month.
I think 51 years, I want to focus on that to begin with because it's an extraordinary milestone. Let's go right back. What was payroll like in 1974 and how does it compare to payroll today?
Very different. As you can imagine, it was paper-based, what we call bar marking, and paper got sent away each weekend to come back on a Monday to check that the big mainframe computers that were housed elsewhere were dealt with. But it was also the correct times then, as you know, everything was done by the state, sick pay, maternity pay, everything. Nothing was paid through payroll then. It was primarily wages. And then with the big changes that I've seen come over the times, that what we were dealing with, things that were dealt with then. I mean, things like on sick pay, earnings-related supplement was paid. Not many people in the world will remember that in the UK back at that time.
What do you think's been the most significant change that you've experienced? I mean, in my history, which is 22 years, so not even half, obviously we've seen auto enrollment, we've seen introduction of RTI, we've seen, I guess when I started in recruitment, we were on Rolodex cards, and now we've got CRMs and systems. So there's been that movement away from spreadsheets to cloud-based systems as well. But for you, what's been the biggest shift?
RTI, without a doubt, because every year reconciling the P35, and every year we used to say we're never going to leave it till the last minute again. And we did the following year, and you'd find an error and have to track back month after month after month to get it put right. So without a doubt, for me, RTI, clearly followed by SSP, because the difficulties in the early days was you had to deduct from people's wages what the state was paying, and you never got confirmation from the people exactly what the state was paying, which made it quite cumbersome. So all the technology things, but primarily them two, and then, auto enrollment comes along, and there's so much, but it really all is about that technology that's taken away with such a manual exercise 51 years ago.
Sure. I mean, knowing what you know now, and I know hindsight, we always have 20/20 vision, right? It's a wonderful thing. Would you have made any of those changes sooner? Do you think Payroll could have been ready for some of those changes earlier, or any of the other major changes that have happened? Do you think they came in at the right time? It's just where we were in our transition, or do you think some of these things, now we know what we know, maybe we could have evolved it a little bit faster?
No, I think things have happened at the right time, because things like, computers, etc., coming along, it was technology really that enabled this to happen. Because I think a lot of these things in them days when it's manual probably couldn't be done. But I think with the advent of starting to push things into payroll, we all know more and more now is going through payroll as opposed to the state. I think time was right for that. And it's even becoming more apt now with the advances within technology today.
I know when I started in payroll, the early 2000s, it was still very much a back office function, in the sense that actually some offices didn't even have windows. And I remember seeing a couple of client visits, there'd be windowless back offices, relatively under-resourced, which is why payroll recruitment was so buoyant back in those days as well, because payroll teams did need additional staff, but it was very hard to find them without the software and things that we have today. Do you think, I guess, the shift has happened now, hasn't it? We're way more visible. Payroll's starting to be seen now and respected in the way they always should have been. What do you think for you was the biggest moment that kind of caused that shift?
I'm not sure, if I'm being really honest with you, because whether I've been lucky or not, I've always felt the profession's been respected at wherever I've worked in terms of the times that's come on, because you've got to go back to when I first started. The finance department was a cost accountant. That was it. HR was a personnel manager. That was it. Payroll was actually one of the biggest departments that there was at that time. And then when it's come on and moved along, in my times, I've always reported into, an MD or a CFO at a most senior level. So I've actually never felt in my own personal experience, wherever I've worked, it's never been disrespected in that way.
Well, that's very encouraging. So take me back to 1974 then. Tell us about your journey, your first role in payroll. How did you find it?
It was interesting, because times of then in 1974, there was no such thing as training or anything like that. You were given a desk and you were told, get on and learn. And you sort of taught yourself from other people that were around you, and sat with the buddy and looking what people did, and all very much from that way. As I say, training, etc., just didn't exist, but it was all very manual. Everybody had cash, obviously, and the process, you'd make the wages up as the start of the week, and at the end of the week, you'd pay the wages out to somebody, and then it would start again the following week, and it was just very the same every week.
And you obviously spent 33 years, I believe, in public sector, 18 in private. So was that your first foray into payroll? Was that with public or private?
Yes, it was. No, it was public. I started in 1974 in what was the National Coal Board.
Okay.
That became British Coal. And then from there, I moved into the NHS. I took a decision that British Coal, those that know, was going down bank. I was off the roll, but took voluntary redundancy, and then got a job in the NHS, and then left the NHS in 2007.
It's quite an interesting one for me as a recruiter, because sometimes it can be very, very difficult to move one way or the other. If you're in private sector and you'll move into public sector, we're seeing a lot more of those moves happening more recently with some of the government changes and things happening. But I think it's also been historically very difficult to move from public sector into private sector. How did you find that transition? Did you have any challenge? Was it seamless for you, or have you noticed difficulties in others?
It was probably difficult, if I'm being really honest.
Yeah.
So from moving from the public to private, in the job that I took, I only lasted 2.5 years, and I resigned with no job to go to.
Oh, wow.
And then got another job. And that's when people say they're unhappy in the work, Nick. That's when you're really unhappy in your work, when you resign with no job to go to.
Sure.
And I think that was a challenge that I didn't realise at the time. The gulf between public and private is huge. And I learned so much in that 2.5 years, though, to be fair, to then took on to my next role, staying in the private sector.
Yes, although you were deeply unhappy, it readied you to a certain degree. So
Yes.
what were those big shifts for you? What were the things, if there are other people considering making the move and they've been in public sector for so long, what are the things perhaps they maybe need to be mindful of to help them with that transition?
The public sector, one of the things I say to people, true story, the public sector, we all get things wrong. Things happen in payroll, mistakes happen. And it was always, how are we going to put this right? And my first experience in the private sector was, how are you going to put this right? Interesting. And it was very much a turn, and the whole way treated, my experience and experience was very much, public sector, everybody was treated fairly, equally. But I learned very, very quickly with the private sector, the demands of hitting your numbers, the targets, etc., etc., etc. That's what drove the business.
And now you've obviously been in private sector for some time. Do you have a preference? I mean, obviously it's kept you there since you went back in. It was obviously a sharp learning curve. But you've obviously found a lot of love for the private sector as well.
Yeah, it's an interesting one. I say to people, the biggest regret in my life was leaving the public sector.
Okay.
Because I give up a final salary pension scheme at 49 years of age.
Wow, okay, yeah.
So that's my biggest regret. However, in answer to your question, I actually prefer the private sector now, because I prefer the cut and thrust and the challenges and the demands, and that's what I prefer now.
There's also an element, it sounds like a little bit like there's an element there of initially not liking it, or not being used to, shall I say, the idea that suddenly the buck stops with you. But actually, when you're in private sector, there's an element now of you enjoying that cut and thrust of responsibility. Yeah. Now, I mentioned in my introduction, you actually changed jobs at 62 in June 2020, if I got my dates correct.
Yeah.
But most importantly, that was right at the height of the pandemic. Now, you've already given us one brave decision where you quit with nothing to go to, but that was quite a bold move. So tell us a little bit more about what made you take that leap, and how did it help reshape your career?
Yeah, at the time at 62, and people that are that age, you are starting to think of towards retirement. And I actually got a call one day during COVID, obviously, to say they'd been asked to make an approach to me. They know we shouldn't meet because of the laws, but would I be prepared to meet because they'd like to offer me a job? And I went along, and, genuinely, it was done there and then, done and dusted. I was offered the job straight away there and then, agreed salary. And just took the leap of faith. Didn't feel I'd got a lot to lose, because, as I say, at 62, looking towards retirement, it was another opportunity. I always had a dream of finishing work on a high, really creating something. That was always a dream of mine. And there was just something about this that made me feel, yes, because lots of jobs I've gone into, Nick, there's a promise of, we're going to support you, we're going to back you, etc., etc. And the first job when I left the public sector, very early doors, was, oh no, we need to do the numbers.
Yeah.
And that was a change. This job's really been different because it's reignited my desire, and truly all the promises have been kept.
Amazing. Well, you want to hear that. That's as a recruiter, that's something that's really wonderful to hear as well. And it sounds like if that was in the midst of the pandemic, they were one of the organizations that really truly valued the contribution that payroll as an industry was making at that moment. Because there weren't, as a recruiter, I know there weren't many people hiring payroll people during that time. It was a very difficult time for not just ourselves, but for all payroll recruiters in that moment. But there were still some moves happening. There certainly were some organizations really respecting payroll in those moments.
Yeah, and I think it's right. And the move to come in was because as an accountancy firm, I'd never worked in a bureau before. They wanted to centralise payroll as a function and create it as a big function and centralise it away. And that was the idea behind it. So, as I say, I didn't go into a partner. I've never reported into a partner. It was absolutely kept as a separate entity, reporting into the CFO as I do now.
And how do you find that shift? Because we talked a little bit about public sector to private, but actually, as a recruiter, again, these are the experiences and the feedback I receive, is actually moving from even just a private in-house entity into a bureau-based operation can also be equally as challenging. How did you find that shift for you?
Okay, it didn't really, because I try to simplify payroll. It's up to gross, down to net. That's payroll for me, and I don't care what industry you work in, because I've worked in the schools, I've worked in civil service, et cetera, the NHS. Everybody thinks they work in the most difficult part of payroll, but actually payroll is payroll wherever you just need to adjust your style, is my experience, to that market that you're now working in.
I think sometimes there's a pressure cooker that changes, or certainly that's the feedback I've had. So, going from in-house, of course, everyone's employee payroll is as important as the next, but when you're dealing with clients, and there could be 1,000 different clients with all different payrolls, and they're all kind of, I guess, because they're also buyers, it can add an extra layer of pressure rather than just being employees. Or that's, and you've got sometimes in a partnership or a bureau operation, if you're an accountancy firm, you have to look after more than one boss. You may have several partners coming at you from different angles rather than just one boss. So it's a kind of different type of pressure is what I've heard.
Yeah. And yes, I don't disagree with that. And I can sort of see that with the partners. But as I've said to you, I joined with the support of the board to say, we're going to make payroll a service line. We're taking payroll off the offices, putting it all into you, and you will make the decisions and run it.
Brilliant. A cracking accolade, by the way, speaking of that power and responsibility, that obviously shows the respect you've gained in that profession.
Yeah, and then that's what happened. And as I say, being in an accountancy firm, but I've actually never reported into a partner.
Yeah, very interesting. Now, I heard you say that you've learned something from every job, every company, every mistake that you've made, and we all make them, and no one's infallible. What are the biggest lessons that payroll's taught you over half a century of being in the industry?
I think it's, in terms of I just think it's the power of payroll. One of the things with me nowadays, I don't think industry still truly respects what payroll's got, because if you're an accountant, you're doing the numbers, you're balancing the books. If you're HR, it's about legislation. But payroll truly understands the data and the numbers and can actually do something with that. But I still don't think industry's bought into realising how powerful payroll can be for them. And I think in terms, that's one of the things that I've seen more and more and more as I've grown, the actual power that sits within payroll from a data perspective and understanding that no other area does.
Yeah, I mean, I've said in a couple of talks, I think it sits at the intersection of the three most powerful things that run businesses, arguably four, which is money, data, and people, right? And if you put those three things together, there aren't many departments that have a level of insight or control over those three things more than payroll, and it's a very powerful combination. I know that you've shared throughout your entire career that payroll, you mentioned earlier in the show, where you've worked, you've always felt it's been highly respected, which is great. And I know you've reported into MDs, FDs, CFOs. Why do you think payroll's been able to earn that strategic seat in the organizations you've worked in? Because certainly from my lens, Stephen, it's not the norm, actually. And it seems like you've been able to buck that trend. And I'm interested to know whether that's because of your approach to payroll and how you've been able to make it strategic everywhere you've been, maybe through that keeping it simple process or not, or whether you've been lucky, or whether there's some advice you can give to others that may be struggling to get it seen in that way and would like to, maybe you can share some wisdom with them that might help them with their journeys.
Yeah, I think it's been, I talk about what payroll can deliver, but also the value of payroll, not just because I know it's an old cliche, you don't hear from the people unless there's an issue, and if it's no noise from payroll, but also payroll can genuinely be a high profit margin run well. And my experience in answer to your question is, everywhere I've been, that's what I've driven to do, to make payroll that focus of attention, that delivery model, that margin, doing the numbers. So actually it's come from that back office that's seen as a cost base to all of a sudden people saying, hang on a minute, there's money to be made here, and primary service, particularly in the bureau world, because payroll's what most people will take first, to sell other services onto that. So I've always been very, very much, this is a business. We're here to deliver a quality service, but we're also here to deliver the margin and the numbers. And once you start doing that, people will stand up and notice you and look at you.
Yeah, I love that. I mean, I've talked, I think, endlessly on this show about moving payroll from cost center to value driver, or seeing it as a profit center. Especially if you've got large, if it's a client payroll, then you can sit across loads of clients. If it's a big payroll for your own organization, it's an opportunity to make the small savings at scale, because the few little identification things you might spot that might make a difference, when you maximize that across an entire employee, count or multiple clients, the numbers can be quite astronomical. And I think now, now we're so much more immersed in the employee experience as well. Of course, the metrics aren't always around direct money that used to be saved, is how we used to look at it. It could also be looked now at how we've improved employee attraction, employee retention, the costs of recruitment, and sort of connecting the dots between those metrics. And you talked a moment ago about the power of the data at people's fingertips in payroll. Attention payroll leaders, if you're listening to this, you already know that payroll has never been more complex. Compliance risks are rising, skilled talent is scarce, and getting it wrong can cost your business way more than just money. It can cost you trust, retention, and of course, brand reputation. I'm Nick Day, host of this show and also CEO of JGA Recruitment Group, specialist global payroll recruiters. Here at JGA, we're so passionate about payroll, we've even turned it into music. Don't believe us? Head to your favorite audio platform and search for Payroll Powers the World, and you can quite literally join us in song about how we believe payroll deserves its moment in the boardroom to shine. At JGA, we'd like to think our passion shines through to our recruitment results as well. With a 97% retention rate and an average 19-day job brief to hire success rate, we work fast, we work strategically, and we work with purpose to connect you to the hidden payroll talent that job ads and direct search methods will simply never reach. So if you're hiring or indeed planning to hire, why not partner with the experts that are shaping the future of payroll? Partner with jgarecruitment.com today, or better yet, drop me a message directly, and together we can make sure your next payroll hire is your best one yet. Do you think we're utilizing that data enough yet? Do you think, I know AI is potentially going to help us to identify those trends perhaps a little bit quicker and at scale, but do you think that's something that people are diving into enough and really, I guess, leveraging the power of the data at their disposal?
Probably not from a business point of view, because they don't want to allow us to leverage that data. Because as I say, from an industry, it's still seen as a cost. For my own self, we absolutely are. I mean, there's nothing under me that I don't understand. I know the cost to serve from a pay slip, the productivity, how much time people are taking. One of the great appointments of mine, Nick, was 12 months ago. I appointed an operations director with no payroll experience, but data, and that's his role, to give us the data of everything that we are producing on a daily basis. Yeah. We fully understand the cost of the operation, where we're losing money, where we're making more money, and that's what drives that down. So for me, we've never used data as much as we do today.
Yeah. Yeah, and we're seeing that on our side. We've started to recruit. That's probably not new now. Last probably 24 months, we've placed more sort of payroll analytics type people or data analysts than we've ever placed before. And these weren't roles that we'd even be discussing 5 years ago. They're almost brand new to market. So I think people are starting to catch on to the value of these hires. And I think that way you can really sort of leverage the power of your systems as well and the data that comes back. Now, I couldn't run this show, Stephen, without asking you about some of your stories. I know there's quite a few colourful stories, and some of yours, and I've spoken to people that know you very well as well, and you got such a round of applause and you won that award, a standing ovation, and rightly so. I think some of the ones that I've heard, and I'm sure there's many others, I'll let you bring whichever you do like to the table, but of course you met Larry Ellison at Oracle HQ. There was a surprise job interview. I mentioned some introduction at the House of Lords. We've talked a little bit about resigning from the job with no role to go to, but I think companies sent your wife a £3,000 thank you check, and you've been headhunted for multiple roles since '93. I wonder if you could pick one or two of those and just share a couple of your stories with our audience, because they're wonderful and really lovely to hear.
Yeah, I think it is, as you're saying, in 51 years, there are lots of stories that sort of spring to mind. The Larry Ellison one in Oracle, that was a truly, truly great experience, because meeting him was totally stage managed by them.
Okay.
In terms of that, but also in terms of the involvement. You've had a story, again, I was involved. When I said we used to make wages up for people, so my week was putting the wages, making up, but then we physically used to deliver the wages to site. And we were told one day to deliver that the van was going to get attacked under an armed robbery, but not to worry, because the police would be around. Wow. And I was terrified.
I'm not surprised.
Absolutely terrified. And we delivered the money to the site. It was a colliery in Stoke-on-Trent, Hemmeath. And we left, and there was no issue at all. Absolutely no issue at all. But that night, it was all over the paper about armed raid, because as I dropped the money off, the raiders attacked the site as we were there. But the police were on site. The police caught them. And that was sort of a real experience, if you like, involved of wow.
They always say life is about stories. Tell us about the surprise job interview at the House of Lords.
Yeah, that was one with a company. The chairman of the company was a lord, and so we got invited. It was when I worked in the NHS, and we got invited to the company McKesson that owned the ESR product, to invite us to dinner. Not just myself, but a number of people to the House of Lords for dinner with Lord Patrick Carter, as was then. And when I went in, somebody went to sit by me and said, no, I want Steve to sit by me. So I sat by him, and then the meal in the House of Lords. And again, there was a funny story there, because as they were serving the food, he said to the waiter, Steve likes steak and chips, so can you go and do him some?
Oh,
brilliant. And we went and actually did me some steak and chips. And the night went on, and we had a conversation. Then the next day, I got a call from the CEO to say, basically, you didn't know, but last night was your interview, and Patrick would like you to join us. And can you go to the House of Lords again to sort out with him? So I went a second time, met with him, and the rest was history. They persuaded me to leave the public sector and go into the private sector.
Fantastic. What an experience. And I believe that company sent your wife a £3,000 thank you check.
They did. And that again was them, because in the first year, we were so successful at an 80% win rate on contracts for payroll in year one, and the growth was phenomenal. And they did send a letter to say we appreciate, in terms of the time that Stephen's spending at work and you were at home, and to show the appreciation of that. And now we appreciate him. Here's £3,000 for you.
How lovely is that? Amazing. And I know I'm a big believer as well, is whenever an island, there's always someone behind the scenes, whether it's a parent, a partner, that supports us to enable us to do the things that we do, right? And I'm sure it goes both ways. So it must have been a lovely moment as well to know that there's a partnership there and there's someone else behind the scenes enabling it to happen.
And I think you're right, because you put the effort in, because to where I've got today, there's been a lot of effort and work gone into that.
Absolutely.
Over the years.
Yeah, half a century's worth of commitment to an industry and getting right to the top of the profession. I mean, it generally was, for those that weren't in the room, there wasn't a single person still in their seat when you were announced as a Lifetime Achievement Award. How did that feel? Did you have an inkling that you were going to win? I don't know how it was done. So, genuine surprise? Did you know it was you when they started announcing?
No, seriously, it was a genuine surprise, because I was with the team and we'd been shortlisted for either 3 or 4 awards. I can't remember. We hadn't won any of them. And then it sort of come up to the Lifetime Achievement Award. We were sitting there, and honestly, as soon as she said, started work at 16, I pretty much know there's not many people in this room today that sort of started with. So, no, it was a real proud moment as well, because to get something like a Lifetime Achievement Award, I do think that is something that it's not given away every day, is it?
No, so absolutely not.
That is something that sort of will live with me forever as well.
Yeah, it was a wonderful moment. I think you weren't the only person that predicted it as soon as they heard the words. I was sat next to Simon Parsons. I think straight away went Stephen Abbott. So everyone was like, as soon as they started it, which was very nice, because I think the room, fully felt that it was deserved as well. That's why there was, everyone was on their seats, and everyone, I think, enjoyed listening to the talk about your career before it was actually, your name was actually announced. It was a real nice whistle stop version of your career. Now, I have to ask this question because this links to what we do, Stephen. But you said, I heard you say you've been headhunted for every role since 1993. I wonder if you could pick 1 or 2 of those stories for me, because I hope maybe if I were my firm, we could have been one of those people back in the day. I'm not too sure. Maybe it's myself. Maybe I've given you a phone call. I wouldn't surprise me. But tell us a bit more about the headhunting side.
Yeah, I think it's just been a case of when I took the decision to leave British Coal. And again, a true story. I went to Plymouth for a few days with my wife and family, and the girl knew I was in Plymouth, but not where I was in Plymouth. And we were in the restaurant having a meal at night, and someone said, "Are you Stephen Abbotts?" Suggested a phone call for you. So it can be a phone call for me. And it was Sally who said, "I've been phoning every hotel to find you, and now I've got you." Says, "Can you go to Birmingham tomorrow for an interview for this job and leave your family there?" And I did go to Birmingham the next day, drove back, and I got the job, and the rest was history.
Very good. Well, fair play for the tenacity of that recruiter. Yeah, very good indeed. I know that I want to go back a little bit as well, because I have a personal passion for, which you may know anyway from talks, around the psychology of fear and around the cultivation of courage. Now, you mentioned earlier that you left the job with no job to go to, and that does take courage. And I know it was because you were, at the moment, I think you mentioned you were deeply unhappy in that particular role, but make no mistake, there's a lot of people unhappy that don't necessarily have the courage or struggle to find the courage or the bravery it takes to leave. What did that teach you about work life and also self-worth as well? Because I think you need to, my belief would be, you need to have a fair degree of self-worth to be able to cultivate that level of courage to take that risk. But it'd be great to understand a little bit further, because this is something that a lot of people do struggle with who are in a mental health crisis, a lot of anxiety in the workplace. If there's any lessons that perhaps you could share that might help others that may be feeling a little bit low.
I think the lesson that did it for me, one of the best things that's ever happened to me in life was getting made redundant. Now, I volunteered when I was in British Coal in 90. I took voluntary redundancy. But actually, when I was told, "We're pleased to say we're granting your wish and we're making you redundant," hearing that word, making you redundant, was horrendous.
Yeah.
But I went and got a job. And what it said to me, actually, yeah, I can just go out and get another job. Why have I been fearful all these years and stop? And it was that time then of going out and getting a job. So actually, from that day forward, I'd never been fearful, because I've always believed in myself and I've always known my self-worth. So when the time come that I felt unhappy, not because I didn't get a lot out of the job, but that culture change from public to private sector and what I'd learned, I just thought, no, I don't need to do this. So I'm just going to resign, and then I'll look for something else and get something else. And I did. And it was the same again, coming to where I am today. because it's that self-worth. And I've actually never ever struggled with lack of self-belief and capability.
That's very good. That's good. I mean, as you know, I work as an executive coach as well. And I obviously, a lot of my clients, it's interesting, will often come to me when they've gone through something like a redundancy and they feel like we need to find coaching when there's a bad moment, but sometimes prevention is better than cure. But either way, I'll always say to them, life is an infinite game. We don't know if it's good news or bad at this point. It feels bad because we're being threatened. Our survival's been threatened and we're not sure, we're frightened of the unknown. That's what makes us uncertain. But I would say 99% of the people that have gone through that process, 6 months later will be saying it was the best thing that happened because they've ended up finding the position that did value them. They've got a new challenge. They're not living that stress. It's just very hard when you're in the moment to feel like that. So I think knowing that you actually voluntarily put you in that position with that confidence and know that it could change, I think is a really good thing for people to hear, because there is always opportunities out there. And I know in the moment it can be scary, and it can be. But trust the process, trust your experience, and life's about stories, as we know in yours, and it can change. Going back to your Lifetime Achievement Award as well, I wanted to mention, because you, in your speech, when you gave a few words, you said that payroll has given you a fantastic life. What do you mean by that? Tell us a little bit more.
I think in terms of the life I've had, so if you think about it, I left school in August 1974, and I've never been out of work a single day since then. I've always had a job that I've enjoyed, I've loved, I've seen the value of it, the worth from it, and I've always had a job where I've been remunerated, I believe, fairly. So that's given me that style to see the world and to do things. So for me, honestly, I couldn't have had a better life than what payroll's given me. And that's not just for me, but what I see sort of gives back to people. I go back to my point at the first place where it touches everybody.
Yeah.
And that I love nothing more than, trying to find and solve that problem for people, because can't do doesn't exist with me, because you can do anything that you want.
It's a wonderful snippet for those listening, or for those that are, maybe they've got friends, family, children who are considering a role in payroll. That's a great little snippet they can show back. It's given you a wonderful life and you've enjoyed it and you've got to the top of the game with it, which I think is a really good example. And you said it touches everybody, but it touches everybody not just annually, it touches everybody every single pay cycle. It's probably the only function that touches every person, every single pay cycle without fail. It's very, very consistent in that way. And that's very, very unique. Of course, you've lived payroll's past. You're now shaping its present. When you look at the future of payroll, Stephen, what excites you and what concerns you?
I think what excites me, what's next? We don't really know what's next. I spoke about RTI and auto-enrollment. We honestly never thought of them years ago. So something will be next that we can't think about. Technology's never feared me. People talk about AI and that now, what it'll bring. I remember when green screens come in. Oh, that's us finished with green screens. And then computers come in. Technology has only enhanced what we do. It's never replaced what we do. And it's never really threatened it. Because what's come out of it is that you can do more things and you can offer more and do more. And it's just changed the role. So the technology bit really doesn't fear me. It will just enhance what we've got. And what the future is, for me, as I see, is just growing the business that we've got today. Our turnover now, since I've joined it, we're now at 20 million a year payroll turnover, producing 135,000 pay slips a month, which are phenomenal numbers that personally, I have a strategy and a growth to significantly increasing that. So that's what I want, and that's what I see changing in the world.
Yeah. It sounds very exciting. I mean, for some, there will be bamboozling numbers already, but it's very, very impressive. And I think you put it nicely. To take it 360, you almost started the show earlier talking about how you've hired someone. And the reason you've hired someone, of course, is because of what technology is enabling us to be able to do. So where people are fearful that we're losing and it's going to be replacing, and we're both of us, I think, are advocates for the fact that it's not replacing, it's augmenting. I think that analyst, that data analyst that you hired, okay, that individual wasn't from a payroll background in that instance, but lots of people are hiring people from payroll backgrounds with payroll analytical experience, is an example of where the industry has changed and shifts, as it always will, as it always has done, and payroll's able to shift with it. And that's going to be resulting in a different maybe type of payroll person and a different set of skills, but very much still human at the heart. And I think, if anything, to reassure people, it's more immersed now in the employee experience than it's ever been before. I'm sure if you were to compare 1974 when you came in to where we are now, and the connection we have with our employees now, certainly in my experience, has shifted quite considerably. Have you seen the same from your side?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And just touching on that point, Nick, if I can, sort of, about changing roles. When I joined in 2020, I had 3 direct reports. Today I have 14.
Yeah.
That all do roles of like compliance director, backs, business development, sales, operational. And you'll notice I'm not even talking about processing the payroll there, because we've created all them opportunities for people on top of processing the actual payroll.
Yeah. I think it's a great point, because I think as much as technology makes things simpler, it also makes everything else, it can do more. So it can make a lot of other processes way more complex, because now payroll can deliver a lot more than just pay. We're now able to pay, it used to be just domestic payrolls. I'd be recruiting people within a commutable postcode from your office. Now we can recruit all over the world. That there's different levels of complexity, different levels of compliance. We've got salary, we've got benefits now coming into the payroll space. And if anyone hasn't read the recent PBIX report and understood from the budget the complexity of what's coming around salary sacrifice, which we don't have to go into today, Stephen, don't worry. It highlights that payroll needs some simplification. It needs technology, because it's incredibly complex. And I would argue it's probably way more complex now than it's ever been before. And just trying to get to grips with some of the mandated PBIX report that came out from HMRC last week is enough for me. It blows my mind. So I think there's a lot of reassurance for people to have that payroll is increasingly getting more complex. As a result of that, it's increasingly being shown to be evolving as a respected, function within organizations. We're seeing roles elevate now with people, real candor and people wanting to create a chief of payroll officer. And whether we see that soon or not, I don't know. But certainly a lot more payroll directors now, a lot more global payrolls now, and a lot bigger payroll operations as well. And I think the other thing to notice is there's more technology and service providers that have come into this space now than ever before. And that's because they see a market here. They see growth, they see opportunity. How do you handle those? You must get inundated with not just headhunting requests, Stephen, but I imagine you must get inundated with vendors and people selling their wares and trinkets as well.
Yes, there's an honest answer. Yes, we are currently looking to replace our payroll system with cloud-based. We'll be announcing in the coming weeks who we've chosen for that. But yes, lots of other companies looking to try and solve. And do you know what? The truth of the matter is, we do look at everything. We genuinely do. Because if something's going to make us more efficient, then we're interested. Because again, and I know I touched on it earlier, where I am is delivered for me today. I've been in the fortunate position that in 5 years of working for this company, everything I've asked for, I've got. I've never yet been said no to, hence the 3 direct reports to 14 direct reports, changing the payroll system, investing in technology that sits outside of that. We work with a company for gamification with the staff, and literally I've had the backing and support for all of that investment.
Fantastic. Well, I think that's a really, it's a really lovely place to open the vault with, because I think it will give the listeners reassurance that the investment and the commitment and the support from outside influencers, people outside of payroll, from bosses, from finance, from HR, it does exist. Sometimes it's about how it's positioned, and hopefully shows like this and listening to people like yourself, Stephen, will help raise the profile even further. So let's open the payroll vault. I've got four short, sharp questions for you today. There's an extra one in here just for you, Stephen. What is one piece of advice you would give to anyone working in payroll today?
Believe in yourself.
Beautiful. Love that.
Yeah.
If you could change one thing about the payroll industry overnight, just one, what would it be?
I think it's the complexity that you touched on. They tend to, while we make changes, PBEX, the one you've just spoken about, they tend to make them complex as opposed to making them easy.
Yeah, I've seen that, and I feel it. I feel it for people like yourself as well, giving me the feedback, and on Payroll Question Time and other shows, we hear that a lot. In hindsight, what's the one thing you wish you knew at the very start of your payroll career?
It's an interesting, because I'm going to go back, Nick, if I can, to as I admitted, the biggest mistake in my life was leaving the pension of the public sector, and that probably is, I knew then, the value of a final salary pension scheme.
Yeah, okay, no, that's fair. That makes sense. They are quite valuable. Payroll has given you 51 years of stories. So if payroll was a person, how would you describe your relationship with it? That's deliberate for you. I've never asked that question before, by the way.
I'm glad you said at the start. I got some time to that, because
yeah.
I was hoping it was going to be your favourite song.
Well, that is what usually comes. I'll tell you what, I can ask you that as well. Maybe we'll go to fifth. But I'd change this one just for you.
It's a really difficult one, to be honest with you. I don't really know how to answer that one. As a person, what person?
As a person, how would you describe your relationship with it?
Okay, I'm going to go back to what I said before. I believe it's trusting, confident, and reliable.
Okay, I'll take that. That's very nice. And of course, you mentioned you had one prepared. So if payroll was a song, Stephen, what would it be and why? I might as well ask you now.
Yeah,
I feel like you've come armed.
My way. Thanks a lot, because I genuinely believe I have done it my way.
No, fantastic. I love that. I mean, look, you've had 51 years in payroll. I guess I have to ask this question as an special one as well. It's not really in the vault now, but just to close the show, what's the legacy you hope to leave behind for the next generation of payroll professionals, Stephen? If you had a crystal ball and you could make that happen, what would it be?
Yeah, I think the legacy is, for me, and again, I have touched on it throughout, is the industry itself starts to see the value of payroll. Payroll for me is a professional role. It's there. It's respected. We now need, I know people like the CIPP, yourself, etc., trying it, but businesses need to understand, with cost pressures coming down today, the people that truly understand the numbers and what can be done with them is payroll.
Yeah. Love that. The great way to finish the show. Stephen, generally, it's been an absolute honour to have you on today. I was really excited when you accepted this invitation to join me on the Payroll Podcast. Your career, your wisdom, your stories, and I suspect we've only touched the surface of them today. It's been a genuine masterclass in how to hold yourself, how to apply yourself, how to raise the profile of this profession. You've done it wonderfully. I have to say personally, thank you to for all of, on behalf of our listeners, really, to everything you've given to our listeners over the course of time, everything you've given to payroll, and obviously, of course, for joining me today on the Payroll Podcast. For anyone that's listening, you can connect with Stephen on LinkedIn. I will put his LinkedIn link in the show notes, so you can click straight through to those. And if you're hiring payroll talent and you know where I am, I'll put my link in there as well. My name's been Nick Day. I've been the host of this show. Please do remember to click subscribe and to follow. But most importantly, check out the next episode, share this with your colleagues and friends, and let's all finish with a huge thank you to Steve Abbotts for joining me today on the Payroll Podcast. Stephen, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for the time.
Deal is the global payroll platform built for complexity. From payslips to benefits to compliance in over 150 countries. Deal centralizes everything in one secure workflow with real-time visibility across your entire workforce. No fragmented systems, no chasing local vendors, just accurate, compliant pay delivered on time, every time. See why more than 35,000 businesses trust Deal. Visit DEEL.com/nickday to book your demo. That's DEEL.com/nickday.